Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, 2022 Survey Results Discussed, How Automation is Unlocking New Value in Construction. This event is brought to you by Engineering News Record and sponsored by FlowForma. My name is Ellen McCurtain, Custom Content Editor for ENR. Thanks for joining us today. 100 plus key construction decision makers were recently surveyed in the U.S. to understand how their organizations are developing and executing the strategies and tactics to achieve more orderly, productive, and profitable outcomes with the automation of business processes. Today, we'll analyze the survey results, and guest speakers will share their approach to digitization within their organizations. You'll also learn how to take control of construction outcomes, minimize risk, and protect profits with process automation. Please join me in welcoming today's presenters. Connor McGrath is a digital marketing executive at FlowForma. He contributes to FlowForma's marketing strategy by empowering its community with thought leadership content and resources to transform business processes with the leading no-code process automation tool on the market. We'll also hear from Paul Stone, product evangelist and strategist at FlowForma. With a broad experience in the IT industry, Paul uses his in-depth product and domain knowledge to support clients and internal teams. He also proposes, manages, and communicates the product roadmap, working to align FlowForma's product with the needs of their clients and the demands of the wider market. Joining FlowForma in their discussion, we're excited to welcome Rick Dowell, president and co-founder of Pontem Innovations. Rick has an extensive background in senior operational leadership roles and board governance. He has a proven track record of achieving quantifiable operational improvements and business growth. Finally, we'll also hear today from Tucker Fife, real estate financial analyst at Branagh Development. Tucker joined Branagh Development in 2019 as a financial analyst. In addition to underwriting and helping obtain entitlements for development projects, he works on automating processes across Branagh's lines of businesses, most recently with FlowForma as they transition onto SharePoint. At the end of the webinar, our presenters will answer any questions we received from the audience throughout the presentation, so don't forget to submit them in your Q&A section of the webinar console. And now, I'm excited to hand it over to Connor McGrath to begin today's discussion. Over to you, Connor.
Thanks, Ellen. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So as Ellen mentioned, to give you a little bit of brief background about today's webinar, FlowForma conducted a survey with 100 decision makers from US construction firms, all about the state of digitization in the construction industry with an emphasis on workflow and business processes. And so today we're just going to have a chat about the survey results that we found. And as Ellen mentioned, just to reiterate as well that for any polls or other topics, please to get involved. And if there's any questions that you may have, to pop them in, and we'll hopefully get to them during our Q&A session at the end. And just as a reminder as well, that our new survey results report is available from the handout section on your webinar panel as well. So I'd really encourage you to download that. It's a nice takeaway from today's webinar. So with that, I suppose we should probably get on and discuss the current digital state of construction. And our first finding from the survey was that typically 26 to 75% of construction companies' business processes are managed on paper, in emails, or on spreadsheets. So as you can see, it's quite a large number. And I suppose to kick things off, Tucker, perhaps this is something maybe you've come across in your experience or, whilst in conversation with peers in the industry.
Yes, of course, Connor. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to join you guys for this discussion today. Right off the bat, I find the large two middle groups very unsurprising, let's say. I think that most construction companies want to update their processes and for the most part know the positive effects of digitization and automation, but the nature of the business makes truly total transformation extremely challenging because in the industry you need to coordinate with so many people outside of your organization that you don't have control over. For Branagh as a general contractor, we have to coordinate with subcontractors and consultants across so many trades who all have a different level of technological know-how and just platforms that they're using, which makes a true full-scale change extremely challenging because if you have a great subcontractor you trust and like working with, you can't leave them behind because of your digitization process. So that high between the 26 and 75 is about what I was expecting.
Sure. Yeah, I can understand. And I guess, Rick, that's probably something that maybe you've come across with your work at Pontem Innovations. I can't imagine anything here is probably a surprise to you, or maybe perhaps it is.
No, that's right, Connor. Is our experience at Pontem and working with construction companies is definitely that a lot of processes remain to be in that combination of paper, email, spreadsheets, and I think to Tucker's point is there's so many, most project sites for construction are obviously away from the office. There's different people, different companies on site with different levels of sophistication, and ultimately the tools that were available, even 3-5 years ago. Weren't able to meet the needs of all those different stakeholders. And I think there's been a lot of changes in that time. And FlowForma is a great example of something that's much more seamless and will allow a project to meet people where they're at for consistency so everybody can be utilizing the same process. And that would be something where organizations that have tried it in the past need to relook at it and be like, okay, maybe this didn't work 3 or 5 years ago, but it's a different story now.
Sure. Absolutely. And on that, I think we've got today's first poll question as well, and it's quite very much based on that topic. So we're looking from the audience today to figure out roughly what percentage of your business processes are managed on paper, email, or in spreadsheets. So I think it's very, very relevant and very topical at the moment. So I might just give the audience some time to slot in their answers on that, and we've got the percentages broken down at approximately 1 to 25%, 26 to 50%, 51 to 75%, or 76% to 100%. So please do take part in the polls, and I might just give another 10 or 15 seconds for that poll, and before I close it, but I do see plenty of answers coming in. So I might just give it another 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I think we're all done at that. So I might just pull up the results very briefly on our next slide here. So as you can see, I think 51 to 75% is the leading candidate there. So I think that what we've been discussing, Tucker and Rick, in the previous slide, I think it's still very prevalent. So from that onto our next finding from our survey results, which essentially here we were looking at how digitization is, if it's either a important or a top priority for construction companies. And as you can see here on the graphic in front of us, 63% claim that it's a top priority, followed by 30% then who claim that it is an important, also an important feature. So I wonder, Paul, is that something that you've seen in your discussions with construction firms at FlowForma?
Yes, absolutely, Connor. It's really encouraging, actually, for me to see this figure so high, 63%.
Sure.
Because what it means is that people are realizing that processes, first of all, are key to their business. That processes are key to their operations. Processes drive them to their business goals at the end of the day. So digitizing those processes is really significant and important to them. I think what they find as well maybe is that in the past, and this is going back to something that Rick mentioned earlier on, How to digitize those processes was really a bit of a mystery and quite a challenge. So if you're stuck on paper and spreadsheets, or you're using a system that has not got a process engine inside it, then you know what, it can be very difficult to digitize those processes, or at least it was before FlowForma came along. More about that later. But certainly digital processes are definitely an area that it's an easy way to actually get return on investment when you're investing in technology. If you focus in on digital processes, because they're directly tied to business goals, you can measure those processes when they're digital, and then you can quickly relate that back to your investment in technology. So it's as I said at the beginning, it's very encouraging to see that people are realizing digital processes are something that needs to be elevated on the agenda in terms of their digital transformation.
Sure, I think that makes sense. I wonder, Rick, is that something similar you've seen as well at Pontem? I mean, is it a top priority from what you've seen, or is it, as we see here on the graph in front of us here, that it is just important?
I would say it's definitely a top 2 priority for most organizations, and I think one of the key reasons why is for executives that are looking out into the future, and most of them, that is their job, is to be looking at what the organization's doing 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And when you start to describe the characteristics of a successful organization 3 years from now, I think a lot of the characteristics would be in the realm of having digital processes, utilizing their data effectively and having real-time reporting, the automation of processes, and that includes those manual and repetitive tasks that often take up so much administration time but aren't necessarily adding value. And so I think when you start to understand that those are going to be the successful, profitable companies, the question that Paul raised is a great one. Is, okay, so how do we get there? What does that look like? And some of the tools that are available now are can be pretty seamless and a lot less scary and time intensive than they were 3 years ago. So not surprised to see that this is a top priority, because ultimately to become a successful company in the future and to continue to be a leader, this is necessary.
Absolutely. I think then we can move on to our third finding from our survey results. And essentially the question here we were asking was, what challenges that construction firms are facing. And from the graphic here, you can see that safety of remote data access and paper heavy reliance are the top 2 challenges faced, I suppose, from construction firms. Is this something, Tucker, that perhaps you would have seen over the years in the industry, or is there anything on this graph here that you're slightly surprised isn't a little bit higher?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Connor. I think that, first off, the reliance on paper-heavy processes is definitely a struggle that I have going about our digitization and automation efforts on our construction side, especially because people generally like having hard copies of things, especially in that line of business, particularly with plans. I think that, a construction site is a demanding, rough environment, and paper plans, you don't have to worry about dropping on the ground or charging. So that kind of reliance there fosters a heavier reliance on other paper processes. So internally, for me, I found the best way to challenge this reliance is to develop automations that don't just meet the same functionality that you're getting with paper, but surpass it in key ways for the user, not just for management on the reporting side. So that's definitely something that struck a chord with me. One thing I was a little surprised by were the security concerns. I consider with some common sense best practices. A huge benefit of moving on to SharePoint and Office 365 is I feel like our data is tremendously more secure now. I think that especially paper can be like compromised or stolen in as many ways as you can think. But I find with some best practices, remote data can be tremendously more secure. So I think this is a good thing that people are keeping in mind. And in general, I think it's something that people not overestimate, which is kind of why I was surprised to see it so highly represented here.
Sure. Yeah, I think paper across construction sites is a real pain point. I'm wondering, Paul, is there anything on here perhaps that you may think that you're surprised it could be slightly higher, whether it's off-site working or perhaps something maybe to do with external parties?
Yeah, absolutely. I would have thought the interaction with external parties combined with the paper reliance is really a significant thing, because pieces of paper are hard to move around between people. And when you move them around between people, they get lost in transit. So, the paper reliance combined with the exchange of data with third parties, I would have saw as really significant challenges, and certainly something that we're seeing in our client base. And because we make that happen all electronically, people really see the benefit of that, significant benefit of it. And going back to Tucker's point there, I think I would agree with him wholeheartedly in terms of, cloud services these days are very secure. I think in the past, with technology limitations, there might have been concerns over security on digital systems, but now with cloud-based systems like Office 365, SharePoint, etc., like FlowForma, security is much, much higher, much more robust with encryption everywhere. So I think, again, going back to Tucker's point, that, that's a good deal more secure in many ways than paper, which, can get lost, can get misplaced, or worst case, can get stolen by parties. So I think with latest cloud technologies, security is much, much less of an issue than it would have been in the past.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think we've got our second polling question here for our audience today. And it's asking, what is the biggest challenges that you face with your processes? So essentially, again, it's piggybacking off the last slide that we were just on, and getting an idea as to how our audience are faring with their processes. So yeah, if we could get the audience perhaps to give us some feedback as to what their biggest challenges are, it'd be really, really great. And you can see here we've got the options of reliance on paper-heavy data, and we've got restricted communications abilities with staff, customers, and other suppliers. We've also got the inability to generate a single overview of business processes, and we've got difficulty engaging with external parties, which is something that Paul just mentioned there. And we've got poor data and reporting as well as another option. So it's quite a diverse mix there of potential challenges. But I think all of them are very, very prevalent across the industry. So I do see some results coming in. Sorry, Paul, yep.
No, if I could just add there, it's really interesting to see the inability to generate a single overview of business processes. And it ties up to transparency and visibility and the gathering of data, which I think we'll be covering off in a very short time on reporting.
Yeah, that's also
sure.
That's also has been a beneficial externality of us bringing FlowForma in and starting to digitize our processes, is when trying to generate this single overview of these processes, we actually found we came to understand kind of how our business runs and the pressure points in our processes more than we ever have before.
Absolutely. So we might move on to our fourth finding from our construction survey. And essentially here we were asking about what the obstacles are for transformation across construction firms. And we've highlighted a few key ones here that we felt were significant, really. I'm wondering, Tucker, are these similar obstacles that perhaps you may have seen or you may see across the industry amongst your peers? Because I know there are some legacy issues with with transformation and getting the buy-in, I guess, from stakeholders. But is there anything here in this graph that perhaps really stood out to you as a significant obstacle?
Sure, yeah. I'll start with QC, IT, and talent appear a lot here. That was a big struggle for us really early on in the process. We hire out our IT to a third-party company, and they do an excellent job at what we need them to do, but this was kind of outside of their wheelhouse. So we had to bring on a third-party consultant to help us explore and diligence different ideas and products, which itself took a couple months and a reasonable amount of resources. So that's definitely an early challenge, I would say. And just looking at the data, what kind of sticks out to me is how high a satisfaction with current processes is relative to management priority and the lack of an internal champion. To me, it seems like if you were tremendously satisfied with your current processes as a status quo, then management might not be prioritizing changing them, or you might lack an internal champion. So that difference there is striking to me. Perhaps that suggests that firms, by and large, are happy with their processes, but they do have one or two people trying to push them forward. That's just one idea, but for me, that's what jumped out as perhaps a difficult thing to reconcile.
I think that's a great point, Tucker. And I wonder, Rick, have you come across these as being obstacles in your work? Or is there something here that you're thinking, especially when Tucker mentioned the lack of an internal champion? It seems quite a lot lower on the list. Is there any of the options here perhaps that you're quite taken aback by?
You know, the one thing I found a little bit surprising, and I actually think is encouraging, is if you look at the very top of this chart, is that the barrier of not being a management priority, or that there's not an internal champion, is actually quite low, which really highlights that organizations have people who want to push this forward. They want to start to look at options around digital transformation. So I thought that was encouraging, and that was something that I wanted to highlight, because there's just a lot of support for the digitization. And then at the other end, with 50% being satisfied with current processes, my take on that, or my interpretation, is very much that people are satisfied with their processes. 50% is right, like that's not a high number to start with, and often that's a change management issue, rather than a belief that the process is really good, or it's optimized, or working really well. Sometimes it's just, it's doing its job, but is it doing it as well as it could be? The answer is probably no. Very often no. Because as we help implement FlowForma and implement process automation, it's amazing how often processes are optimized as we're building out. They're like, oh, we've always wanted to do this and make this improvement to the process, but it wasn't possible, and now it is. So I would say people being satisfied with current processes, that's not a high bar. It doesn't mean that it's good. It just means that they can live with it. And only 50% of people even feel that way. So I think lots of room for improvement on processes.
Absolutely. I think that's a very valid point. And on to our fifth finding from our survey results, quite a significant statistic, that almost all construction executives, which is 96% here of our survey population, report that real-time analytics inform senior management decision making. And I suppose that the real question we had asked was how important it is, and seeing a 96% response rate as being a yes is very, very significant. Is this something, Rick, I know working in an area probably very close to your heart, that is encouraging also?
Yeah, definitely, Connor. I mean, at Pontem, we're focused on helping organizations utilize their data more effectively. And what that really means is pulling that information in a way that allows you to have real-time information. And there's a lot of reasons why that's so valuable for senior management, right? Is one, there's lots of different systems from different subcontractors or people involved in a project, which means if there's a lag in data, it causes challenges and usually requires manual work even just to tie it together so you can start to get a view. And that takes time. And what that means then, if there's an issue, if you could identify that issue or have an early warning, let's say a month in advance of when the problem might hit, you sure have a lot of options to solve that problem. If you see that problem a month after it actually has happened, the number of options available to you to solve that problem gets pretty limited pretty fast. And they're usually not good options. So having real-time info and having an early warning system is so important for making good decisions. And so one of the benefits of FlowForma is that it really makes the data input consistent and sustainable because it's automated, because it's in the same format, it's coming into the same spot. Now you can have some analytics that give you real-time information. And that tying those together is so important. And just the ability for that information to go into a SharePoint, go into a common database. Now you can tie it into dashboards and you can be very creative in terms of the metrics that you're tracking. And I'd say in this case, senior management decision making is something that was highlighted, but our experience has been this benefits decision making at all levels, especially at the operational level, whether that's a site lead or a superintendent or a project manager. The fact that they can go in and get a sense of what's happening on their project, maybe compare it to some other projects they've had in the past, they get some real insight into what's happening and can make adjustments accordingly. Because our experience has been people make really good decisions when they have data in front of them that is valid and accurate. So that's my take, but definitely 96% is an overwhelming number, and excited to see it, but also not surprised.
Yeah. I guess, Paul, this is probably not something too surprising, considering I know FlowForma, the amount of discussions around reporting around real-time analytics.
Absolutely. It's a topic of discussion with our clients every day. And I'm just surprised that anybody at all said no to this. So analytics is just so important. And we've got lots of examples of people using it to help them make better decisions. And basically, by digitizing processes, you're capturing all the data. You're capturing all the data in real time. It's all accurate. It's all up to date. And you're able to use it for reporting. And we have many examples in our client base of people who've done that very effectively. So I'm going to give you one quick example, if that's okay, Connor. Hopefully we have a minute or two. So I'm going to talk to you about a civil engineering project where basically for every 9 meter square area of land, they had to acquire a permit to dig. And they implemented the system to actually issue out the permits using FlowForma, a digital system. It's very efficient. And they were able to see where they were able to dig every single day. Now, this particular project, it was a 31-kilometer stretch of highway. So it was very big, significant project. And they avoided holdups by getting all this real-time analytics. So they were able to see where they permitted to dig in these particular areas along the site. And they were able to monitor that constantly. And the processes were very short, so they might get a permit issued very quickly. So having the information all in real time allowed them to address those bottlenecks, holding up the dig, as they happened across a very large building site. It was really, really significant for them. Big, significant benefit.
Absolutely. And I think from this finding, it's a nice segue onto finding number 6 from our survey report, which essentially, I suppose, we were asking what's most required of construction firms when they're considering a digital solution. And again, I've kind of just highlighted some ones here at the bottom of this bar chart, but you'll see here on the bars in blue that these various options here were what they described as very important, and the greens being absolutely required. And I think we've mentioned it earlier, but ease of use here at the bottom is 60% absolutely required. Is this something, Paul? I suppose even the efficiency as well being quite high as an absolutely required. I can't imagine this is something that's too surprising. People want, an easy to use solution for buy-in across the business.
Absolutely. Those three key things that you highlighted there are really key to our clients. What I'll do is I'll just talk about efficiency. Obviously, people want to see return on investment, and they see primarily a return on investment measured in improvements in productivity and improvements in efficiency. So everybody wants to see efficiency as a key deliverable out of digital processes. And FlowForma is very good at not just helping you to implement those processes, but actually monitor them. So you can actually see how efficient the process is. You can measure that directly. And also you can change that process and improve it over time and measure the improvements in efficiency over time as well. So these are really important metrics, and it's not surprising that this is something that's absolutely required, because essentially you're justifying investment through the improvement in efficiency in your operations. So you need to be able to do that and be able to see measure how the efficiency is being improved.
Sure. And I'm wondering, just as it being an absolutely required option here on this finding, was this something that was of consideration, Tucker, for Branagh when you were looking at a digital solution?
Yes. Yeah, of course. I think, Paul, you knocked it out of the park on efficiency. Is in most cases, I would expect, in our case, why we went down this road and this undertaking to digitize our business and start automating our processes. But something that I find when building these automations is so much of it is a balancing act between how powerful and efficient your workflows are and how easy they are to use. Of course, you want to make each workflow as powerful and cut out as many steps as possible. But the second you make it too hard to use, no one's going to use it, and you've lost any benefit of efficiency. So that balancing act is really important, and something that I think the survey correctly zeroed in on is the Pons as a norm, the whole thing. So that it's really interesting to see those two trickle down to the bottom of this graph.
Sure. I think even the ease of use aspect, I think it's surprising seeing the no code at the top not being an absolutely required, quite as high, being at 30%, but being important at 45. I mean, I think no code and ease of use go hand in hand. And I suppose even then from a reporting point of view, Rick, I know we mentioned that on the previous slide, but getting that sort of higher level sort of view, I guess, of how processes are running, reporting is absolutely a must, really.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, that ease of use allows information to get into the system. I agree with you that the no code piece is so important, because the business process owner can then make the changes to a process to be able to get the information they need, which then can translate right into the real-time reporting. And that chain of events is really difficult in a code environment. And so when you can remove that and make it easy for users to utilize and make changes, now you're constantly in a place where you can continue to optimize and adjust your processes as the requirements evolve. And as we all know, in construction, things evolve really quickly. No two projects are the same. There's always going to be some tweaks or changes that need to be made. So that's been our take from a reporting perspective.
Sure. On our seventh finding from our construction survey, I think really here we asked really what systems that construction firms would like to integrate most with, and as you can see here, we quite a mix, I suppose. CRM systems. I know project management software is a real big one in construction. I can't imagine, Rick, that this is too surprising, seeing the project management being top here of this list. It's very prevalent across the industry.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a project management system, it's really hard to run projects, right? And so all of these systems need to be able to talk together. Like that integration between tools is so vital. And from our perspective, our experience at Pontem is it's really important because employees don't want to go to multiple systems, right? They just want to focus on their process, their task at hand, and make that happen as quickly as possible. So what does that mean? It means they want information to be automatically populated from different systems. We're working with a client right now who one of their big pain points was they had to constantly send out emails and fill out forms, and had to go to multiple stakeholders who wanted different types of forms, and they had to fill out the same information related to project number, location, client, about the 8 different boilerplate items that were pretty consistent once you set up a project. So we've been able to have that be automatically populated on each of the forms. And so now all of a sudden each of these people have just saved 5-10 minutes a form, which is meaningful and makes their life easier because they have lots of other things that they could be spending their time on. So that's an important piece around having the integration, allowing things to be populated from one spot. And the last piece that I think is really important is having the same look and feel of forms and processes across different departments, across different systems, right? When you can integrate and have a consistent format, it makes it a lot easier for people who are utilizing forms that just from a change management perspective, it feels the same. They're like, okay, I know where everything is. I can fill this out quickly, as opposed to learning 4 different systems. And if you're a project manager, you're very likely in 3-4 different systems, depending on the way you're structured. So those are some of the key things that that we've experienced related to integration, and not surprised to see all these systems being up there on this chart is important.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think myself, seeing finance systems being there at 49%. I mean, construction. I mean, there's such a demand. I think really to try and be under budget and be on time that I'm sure finance departments have plenty of headaches. So seeing a finance system there, I think also is really, really prevalent. But I know, Paul, that FlowForma's got loads of integration capabilities. But is there anyone here perhaps that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I'd say actually the bigger point is that, any business process tends to require integration with multiple systems. And FlowForma, as a product, we've focused our efforts on making those integrations as quick and easy as possible, with specific integrations built for systems in the construction sector. But very often, one of the process bottlenecks in the current process is that, somebody has to go into system A and then into system B and then system C to complete their process. And FlowForma helps to automate that and automatically pass information in and out of those systems as you move through the process. So yeah, integration is certainly a big thing. It's a big talking point with all our customer base as well. Increasingly, especially over the past couple of years, integrations has risen up the agenda, and we've responded to that by building out product features specifically to deal with that. So we integrate with backend systems such as Procore, for example, to push and pull information out of that, ERP systems like SAP and so on. We've got a long list. I'm sure we can talk to you about that should you want to. So yeah, that integration is definitely rising up the agenda.
Yeah, and I think then we've come to our final finding from our survey results here today. But it's quite an interesting one here. It's the question we asked was, around the infrastructure projects in the next year. But as you can see here, construction executives think that the $1.2 trillion Infrastructure Improvement and Jobs Act will have an impact on their project pipeline this year and next year. I mean, you can see here that 85% is quite a figure. I don't know, Tucker, is this something that is surprising that it'll have this big of an impact, or what are your thoughts?
Yes, Connor, thank you. First of all, I'm really glad that this made it into the survey. This on its face may not look like a question about automation or digitization, but I think when you see the way it shakes out, it absolutely will be. So Branagh won't be competing for any of these infrastructure contracts, but I think that anyone ignoring $1.2 trillion investment in their industries doing themselves and their business a disservice. So I think that this will create fierce competition amongst the companies competing for these contracts, and the leanest, most streamlined companies who are able to do more with less are going to come out on top more often than not. And of course, process automation and digitization is a huge factor in that, not to mention the way it has let us at least revolutionize our reporting and auditing systems that I associate with government work like this. Brand is looking at how this infrastructure both unlocks sub-markets that have been currently unviable for us, but more importantly to this conversation, how our peers who are in the infrastructure side will win these contracts so we can adapt and not get left behind when they enter other markets is kind of how we are looking at this.
Yeah, sure. So what are your thoughts, Rick? Is this something that you think is going to be prevalent in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, no question. If you look at the results, I think that's a large amount of money that needs to be spent, and it needs to be spent in a efficient manner. And I think the expectation from the government is that there's going to be really good reporting. The expectations around transparency of how this money is getting spent is only increasing. And so as a construction organization, if you're trying to be competitive to win this work, that can be something that you can stand apart on is your processes, your reporting. And frankly, if you're doing it manually in Excel, it's taking up a lot of time and isn't really pushing at the level of sophistication that I think government and owners of these projects would like to see. So we've had some clients who have had some pretty significant reporting requirements but from the owners. And once the data is in there, it's amazing how easy it is for them to start to pull this on a regular basis and give regular updates, because it's not something that has to be done by somebody once a week. Every Monday or every Friday, compile all this information and get it set up. It's actually just a screenshot from an analytics report, and all the information's coming in already daily through a FlowForma form. And that's really a big change for organizations, and the owners really appreciate it. And it's just one more value add in terms of the experience that owners have with the construction company. So that's been our experience related to reporting on this type of work.
Sure. And then I guess to summarize, we've pulled sort of 4 real key stats, I think, from our survey results that we've maybe discussed today. But at 63% being a top priority for construction executives and managers, that digitization is almost 2/3 there of an importance. But you can see there that 87% believe that digitization gives construction firms a competitive advantage. And I think that's a really key outcome and a really key statistic as well, given how saturated, I guess, the construction industry is. And you'll see on the bottom, I think, here as well, that 90% still use outdated methods such as email, Excel, and paper. And we chatted about that as the very first outcome here today. And it's quite a startling number, I think, still that that processes are still being run that way. Whilst I think looking ahead to the next 12 to 18 months, seeing that 74% of construction executives believe that 50 to 100% of their business processes will be digitized within the next 18 months. I think that's quite a significant forecast, I guess, really, for the next 18 months. But I suppose on that being digitizing processes in the next 18 months, I might hand it over to you, Paul, just for a very quick 2 to 3 minute overview of FlowForma and what the process automation tool is all about.
Sure, I'll keep it brief, Connor. I know we're stuck for time here, but basically FlowForma is it's a product that's all about digitizing processes, not surprisingly. And we're an award-winning process automation provider with over 200,000 users across the globe. And we're specializing in the construction space. So we've got lots of examples, case studies and so on of how we've applied FlowForma to construction in the US, but also in other countries like the UK, Australia, and so on. Small projects, large projects, the full gamut. So please drop over to our website to have a look at that detail. Now, FlowForma, the system itself, there's not time to show you the system today, but what I can tell you about it is that it combines digital processes, which is steps that are executed by people on the ground, with data collection, forms, and also document management and generation. So you can generate documents. Is the point that Tucker mentioned earlier on. You can generate documents out of it and save them all in SharePoint. These are just some examples of the processes that people have digitized. They've digitized many, many more than this shortlist, but it just gives you an example. I'm sure there's processes there that you can see would relate to you. One of our big areas is incident management and capturing health and safety requirements. So meeting health and safety requirements, also managing quality, managing resources, onboarding, offboarding, that kind of thing. But there's a long list which unfortunately will not have time to go through with you today. But again, please give us a call and we'll go through those in more detail. Just to cover off some of the clients that we have, just to give an example of the variety of clients really here. We have clients that are large governmental organizations, governmental projects like the Tideway project, which is one of the projects in the UK. We have then clients who are focused on a specific area, like Sullivan Engineering, who deal with building restorations. So we have a wide variety of clients in many different areas of construction. So I wouldn't want people to be thinking that FlowForma specializes in one particular process, one particular type of construction. We actually deal with lots of different clients in lots of different areas. And this is because the FlowForma system is very flexible. You can actually build whatever process you need to work in your environment for your client, for your resources, okay, and make all that work as efficiently as possible.
Thanks, Paul. I know that was a bit of a whirlwind introduction, but appreciate it nonetheless. I think, Ellen, you've got some housekeeping to attend to.
Yes, thank you, Connor, and thank you all for an excellent presentation. Before we start to take questions from our audience, I'd like to remind you that we'd love your feedback. Please take a few moments to complete our webinar survey, which you'll see on your screen now, or you'll be directed to it at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Connor to take our first question.
Thanks, Ellen. So we've had a few questions come in during our session today. The first one here I can see is, so what are your 3 top tips for user adoption? Perhaps Rick, you might be able to take that one for us and give the person here a little insight.
Yeah, happy to talk about user adoption, because that's part of Pontem's. Some of the key things we do is help organizations not only develop processes, but then how do you do it in a way that ensures usage by your employees and by stakeholders. So 3 tips. I think number 1 would be engaging users in the building of processes early on. So this eliminates that idea of a big bang go live that has caused so many sleepless nights for so many people. So if the business owners or anybody or business process owners, people utilizing the processes, if they can be involved in the building of it right from the beginning, it really allows for the optimization of the process as you build it, and the change management challenges really become much less with that approach. So that's number 1. Number 2 would be one where often people get excited about process automation because they know some of their large processes and what a challenge those are. And there's an opportunity to obviously go after those first. But we would recommend taking maybe a little bit of a smaller process or a medium-sized process first and doing it that way, because it's a little bit easier around getting it up and running, which means you're going to have a quick win, which is going to increase user adoption. And then people are going to be, more excited about, hey, this process that we all know is a challenge. Now let's tackle it, because we've already had some learnings from doing a first one that maybe was a little smaller in scope and scale. And then the third suggestion we would have is it's really nice to pick something where you can have analytics and reporting to measure improvements. So it's quite motivating for people to be able to start to track where things are at in a process. Because right now, if you've optimized a process, maybe you've done some swim lane charts, or you've done process flow diagrams. Once those are actually being used, how do you know how efficient they are? So if you can start to pick a process where there's really good tracking around where bottlenecks are, you can, it's exciting to show that in meetings, to show people like, look at how efficient we are. Here's where we've improved. Here's where a bottleneck is. And now, we're going to solve that process by doing X, Y, and Z, or optimize that process, I should say, by doing X, Y, and Z. So those would be the three things that I would highly recommend. So I'll just quickly recap. So engaging users right at the beginning of building processes. Maybe picking a less complex process for the first one that you do. And the third one is anything where there's some analytics or dashboard reporting tied to the process. You should pick that because that's a nice output and something you can show that is exciting for people and drives further improvement.
Great, thanks for the answer, Rick. I think that's some three really good ideas there. We've had loads of questions come in. Thank you to our audience today. Let me see. I have another one here. Perhaps Tucker, you could take this one. There's a question here asking, do you have any tips which can help us to prioritize which processes to automate?
Sure, yeah, that's a great question and something I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah.
I think that the obvious or the first approach that comes to a lot of people's minds, a computer scientist might call it a greedy approach, would be to take your processes that are candidates for automation and assign an amount of time and a cost with how much money it costs you to do them now, and do the same thing for after they've been automated, and just sort that list and go top to bottom. It's probably hard to go too wrong if you do that, but I think that ignores some externalities. One other idea could be if your workflow software offers a support period where they will build your first workflow with you, like FlowForma does. It may be a good idea to really swing for the fences in terms of complexity on building the workflow. I know Rick mentioned it might be a good idea to have one that's simple to execute, but I think there's a difference between how difficult and complicated a flow is to build versus for the end user to use, so that you have the support while you're really making the most of the platform, and you'll learn a lot along the way and be in a really good position for your second and beyond. I also think it's really important that you maximize your chances of someone outside of your automation team coming up to you and recommending an idea for a process. That's where we get most of our best ideas, is from people who are using our processes and say, hey, I think we could be doing this or better. So if you have a department or a set of people who aren't using your software as much or at all, I would prioritize getting it into their hands as fast as possible. And then finally, you can the obvious savings and ROI with automations is the time saved and associated costs as far as time goes. But we found that FlowForma can allow us to cancel some expensive softwares we're paying for by building custom solutions that are redundant with what those softwares offer. So, for example, we recently were able to cancel a tremendously expensive construction project management software because we were able to recreate those tools in FlowForma. So if there's something like that as well, I would recommend prioritizing that.
Excellent. Thanks, Tucker, for that. Just on that mention of ROI, there, Tucker. There's a question here that's come in asking, how soon could I see an ROI from implementing a tool such as FlowForma? Perhaps, Paul, you could take that one first.
Yeah, sure. So Tucker's covered a lot of ground there, just there, and just to say that some of our clients will see the point to ROI is how fast you can get the process up and running and actually in use by people in the field, right? So we've had clients who get that up and running in 1 week, but more typically it's like 4 to 6 week period before the process is deployed and implemented and being used by people out in the field, on sites, etc. And then as soon as it's in use, you're generating ROI. So basically you can measure that, the system captures all the metrics, you can actually see that happening, and you can see how people are using it and how much money you're saving. So I'd say typically it's a 4 to 6 week period. And it all depends on the level of complexity. So as Tucker was saying there, sometimes it's better to go for maybe a more complex process, but often it's better to go for a simpler process that's focused on as many people as possible within the organization, for example. So, it's just each person, each client that we deploy to varies, but typically 4 to 6 weeks.
Great, thanks, Paul. I see we're quite close on time, but we might squeeze in another question or two if we can. There's a really nice question come in here from Logan, actually, and it's asking, do you consider email and Excel digitized even though it is outdated? So that's probably quite a topical answer, I guess. Does anyone like to take that one, perhaps?
Well, I think if you're using Excel to capture data and to maybe track the execution of processes, yeah, you can do it, but you're really not hitting the mark in terms of what's available in technology today. You can do so much more with the dedicated business process management system like FlowForma, and you can achieve a lot more in many different ways in terms of efficiency, in terms of being able to track those processes, being able to report on all the detail being captured during the processes, etc. So I think Excel, well, okay, technically maybe it's being digitized, but it just falls so far short of what you can achieve by actually getting a platform that's built for that purpose.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll jump in and just say Excel's not very scalable. It's not a very scalable solution. That's the biggest challenge. If you're trying to bring that enterprise-wide, it won't work.
Sure. Okay, we've got loads of questions that have come in, but perhaps we might need to get to those after the session today. Thanks everyone for submitting the questions that you got, and we'll make sure that the panel will get to those in the next day or so. We'll try and get those answered for you. But now I think it's time to hand back over to Ellen, and just want to say thanks to our panel. I really appreciate you making the time, Tucker, Rick, and Paul today. But I think it's time to hand back over to Ellen. But thanks very much, everyone, for making the time today.
Thank you.
Join me in once again thanking Connor McGrath, Paul Stone, Tucker Fife, and Rick Dowell, as well as our sponsor, FlowForma. Please check out some additional resources from FlowForma on screen now and in the Handouts tab. If you have any additional questions or comments, please don't hesitate to click the Email Us button on your console, and we'll share them with our presenters so that they can respond directly to you. If you didn't have a chance to fill it out earlier, you'll be redirected to our post-event survey at the end of the webinar. We look forward to hearing how to make our programs work better for you. Please visit enr.com/webinars for the archive of this presentation to share with your colleagues, as well as information about our upcoming events. Make sure to tune back in for our next webinar, Connect the Field and the Office, Access the Job Site Remotely with 360 Reality Capture Data, airing on August 18th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for trusting us with your time today. Have a great rest of your day.